Cloud. Okay. Okay, again, welcome to the purpose of this book with David G and David G. We are in chapter 7, working with others. And hold on, I got to turn my torch on here. We're on page 97. David, you want to recap anything where we left off or
I guess so. This is going to be a nice segue, as David pointed out. We were talking before the meeting of this paragraph. We're going to start on page 97 in the second paragraph. But what we read last week, we mainly focused on the whole time we were in our group was the 12 inconveniences that are on 97 first full paragraph, and there's 12 of them. So the way I look at it, anyways, is if I'm not being inconvenienced, I'm probably not doing enough. And one of David's sponsors, we were at a meeting with him on Monday night, and he even brought it up. It's just like, this is a gift. Sobriety is a gift that needs to be given away. And sometimes we need to be inconvenienced. We need to sit down for long fifth steps. We need to sit there and talk to the family. We need to pick people up, take them to meetings, take them to treatment centers, take them to hospitals. We show up at funerals. We support we have friendship. We have camaraderie. I have to be inconvenienced. And that's a good way for me to measure whether or not I'm really being selfless. This is not a selfish program for me. This is a selfless program. Less David, more God. And if I'm being an inconvenience, there's nothing that God and I can't handle together. So I just really like that Bill put them in there. Maybe he had a little bit to do with that he loved the number 12 as he was writing the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, as he was trying to write the 12 steps out. He just couldn't figure out how to write them and what should look like. He had the Oxford groups to base it off of as the blueprint, the template, and he sat and prayed, put his pen and paper down, and then the thought came to him, and he wrote down the 12 steps, and he looked at him and he said, 12 disciples, 12 steps. I think that's pretty good. And I got to agree. So Bill had a little bit of a fascination with 12, and then later on he wrote our 12 traditions. Then a little bit after that, he wrote our 12 concepts. So 12 steps, 12 inconveniences, 12 traditions, 12 concepts. So let's get into the study tonight.
Okay, awesome. So we're picking up on 97. We had finished that paragraph on the inconveniences, as David was just talking about. It was the first full paragraph. So we've got just a little short paragraph, which is the second one. We seldom allow an alcoholic to live in our homes for a long time. It is not good for him, and it sometimes creates serious complications in a family. And if you look just across the page, 96 in that bottom paragraph, this concept of how we can help somebody who's freshly getting recovered is covered in that paragraph too. He may be broke and homeless. If he is, you might try to help him out about getting a job or give him a little financial assistance. It goes on to say perhaps you want to take the man to your home for a few days. And then we read the whole thing. We talked at some length about using a lot of prayer and a lot of good judgment about how to extend yourself, especially when it comes to bringing someone drunk or maybe freshly raw into your home, right? A lot of prayer about that and a lot of discussion with your families, right? So this supposes that perhaps we have allowed someone to crash for a few days, right? Seldom allowed to live in our homes for long at a time. Not good for him. Sometimes creates serious complications in the family. Why is it not good for the alcoholic to live in our home for too long? Matter of common sense, guys. We come in, first of all, a lot of us, history of being freeloaders, right?
Mm.
So we come in and we do some more freeloading, right? And now this is not about not trying to help someone who is down on their luck. But and my wife, she's not in this study with us, but she's been recovered in AA for 18 years. She'll talk about this a lot. You get sober, you get recovered. It's like time to pull your big girl pants up, she says, and like go. Let's get going. Let's put some effort in. And it's not just about sponging off other people. So if I let someone in my home, they need a little, a little jump start to get going. It's okay, but let's not let them get comfortable. Big part of recovery for me is getting back into society too, right? Get out there, get a job, find some place to live. We can help, but we can't over enable them, right? And obviously, it sometimes creates serious complications in the family. Yeah, right. What are we like as we come into recovery? We are wrecks. I certainly was. And I can't imagine that I would have been a great pleasure to be a house guest in anybody's home.
Yeah, and if you remember back on page 16 of Bill's story, the lawyer who lived with Bill, he lived with him for almost a whole year. His name was Bill C., the lawyer that lived with Bill and Lois. He committed suicide in Bill's home, and it's not really why we wouldn't allow people to be in there. But I think David's point is so good and so valid. Is the seventh tradition says that we should be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions, right? And I think the traditions applied in my life too. It's like I need to be self-supporting and quit taking handouts, go get a job. I always tell my sponsors, if I have to have a job or a career, you need to have one too. Busy is a good thing. Like busy is really, really a good idea for this alcoholic and drug addict. Like too much time in between my ears is not a good place to be. So yeah, so for a short period of time, possibly, but as David pointed out, counsel with my wife, counsel with David, counsel with my sponsor before I made that decision. I'm just not going to let anyone come and live in my house. I never lived on anyone's couch. I didn't have to do that, not yet. And by the grace of God, that won't have to happen. But I'm open to all things. We'll never know where God's going to take us.
So just before I move on here, just to set up this next paragraph, remember where we were back on the top of 96 as well, which is where I think we started last week. It was with this: do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. So and then we had a whole paragraph to talk about if he doesn't, we look and pray for another person to help, but setting up a bunch of these conditions. So here into this third paragraph now on 97, right? Though an alcoholic does not respond, so it's bringing up trying to carry the message, and they're not biting at the moment, right? Though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. Should they accept and practice spiritual principles, there's a much better chance that the head of the family will recover. And even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason we should neglect his family. So if he does not respond, he's probably a cannot, right? Remember we talked about cannots and will not, cannot do this work, or maybe he's a will not. He's probably a will not. He won't do the work, right? He's not done good and for all. Let him finish what he's doing, and if he or she or they need to go out and drink again, I hope they make it back. I do. Then it says you should continue to be friendly with them. Love and tolerance is our code. I am not judging anyone. Only by the grace of God. I do not deserve the sobriety that I have any more than the guy who's under the bridge tonight taking a pull off that bottle. No way in the world. And it wasn't a mere luck either that happened. It's like it took a lot of hard work on my part, and I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. But the bottom line here is that I have a personal relationship with my creator. And that's what I have to have, that conscious contact with God. So, and when I do that, I don't lose sight of the first step, that I have no power, no choice, no control. When it comes to alcohol, once I put it in my body, whatever your drug of choice is, please just substitute here, or no choices, that when I put it in my body, something happens to me, an abnormal reaction. Once I stop, I cannot stay stopped. And my life is unmanageable. That is the real problem here. And we talked about the bedevilments a while ago on page 52. So I have to remember that love and tolerance is our code, and the family should be offered our way of life. So I just want to go to the forward of the first edition and just talk about, because Bill brings it up a few times in the book. I'm only going to address one of them, but the very first paragraph in the forward on the title pages, and I'll read the whole paragraph if it's okay with the group here. We of Alcoholics Anonymous, so we're talking about the first 100 Anonymous, are more than 100 men and women who have recovered. Remember that point there, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So we're talking about offered our way of life. That's one definition, is we recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. To show others, alcoholics, precisely how we recover is the main purpose of the book. So I'm armed with the facts about myself so that I can carry this message, not just to the alcoholic, but to anyone I come in contact with. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. So we hope that you study this book and you find a way to find a power greater in yourself. And then it says, we think this account of our experience will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic, That's what this whole book is about, to find out that it had nothing to do with the way I was raised, the color of my skin, my sexual orientation, or how much money I did or did not have. That is not what made me an alcoholic. And I did not know that until I got here and I studied this book. And then it says, you may many do not comprehend that an alcoholic is a very sick person of what? Mind, body, and spirit. I just talked about that earlier on. And besides, here's the point I was going to make. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has advantages for all. And that's the key is, am I an advantage to everyone's life that I come in contact with today? And with that family of the newcomer, yeah, I need to be a demonstration in their life. We talked about this. Paige helped me out with this a couple weeks ago or a month ago when she was in one of our, when David was out of town, and we talked about attraction rather than promotion. What is an attraction? Attraction is a demonstration of how I live my life today, how I have a relationship with God, how I have a relationship with these steps, how I have a relationship with the fellowship, and how I have a relationship with service. I get to be a demonstration of that in everybody's life today, because I'm a child of God and I know that. And I'm an agent of God also, which means I get to work on behalf of another. So our way of life, and there could be, free of self, free of resentment, free of fear, self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking, all those things that I don't have the power to remove. God has removed that from my life today. My responsibility to carry on and do the vital discipline of 10 and 11, and then carry this message in 12. Should they accept and practice spiritual principles? That's up to them if they want to do it. Again, I'm just the demonstration in my life. There is much better chance that the head of the family will recover. If I'm an attraction, or if I wasn't an attraction, why would you want what I have? So it's like I can't be someone who and I don't think I've ever done it. Maybe I have, but I stood at the pulpit, or I stood on the mountaintop and preached to someone. I try never to do that. I'm not better than anyone else, and I'm no worse than anyone else. I'm an recovered alcoholic, recovered addict. And then the last thing on that paragraph says, even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. That is kind of the concept of Al-Anon, right? It's like, welcome them to Al-Anon. What a wonderful 12-step program that is, too. I've been to it many times. I qualify, have family members that were alcoholics and drug addicts, right? So Al-Anon is kind of an introduction here, I think, in a little bit, but it's definitely the concept of Al-Anon that says that even though he's still drinking, the family will find life more bearable. And I think we could even expand upon that, like talk about our way of life, freedom from the bondage of themselves.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. I think David did a really nice job here. I'll just maybe double down a little bit on the family part of this. So, if your experience is like mine, most of the newcomers you've met in your time in recovery has been in meetings, right? I mean, meet most newcomers in meetings. Some when we go to treatment centers, places like that, and occasionally some phone numbers off the helpline, right? But 99% of newcomers meet in meetings. So I don't get to meet their family sometimes ever, or sometimes much longer down the road. Things were different back in 1939, and you see this in a lot of the stories where the early people, Bill and Bob and Bill D and some of the other early ones, were going to see people in the hospital. We were seeing men at the time, right? The earliest the drunks were men, and I'm sure their wives were probably there beside themselves. So they probably met the family very early in the process. And other times, people were learning about this small group of people who were getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous sort of through the grapevine or through church. So it was a friend of a friend, and there was a family introduction. This isn't always the case. And the reason why I'm making a point about this is, again, a little different today than in 1939 when this was built. I'm not sure the book is saying, hey, if you meet a guy at a meeting and he doesn't respond, go figure out who his wife and kids are and go pay them a call. I don't believe that's the intention here. I think this is, if an existing relationship has been formed and the family still would like some help and interaction, we should offer it. But to David's point, we have something today that they didn't have formally back then, which are programs like, Al-Anon and Nar-Anon and some of these other fellowships for the people in our lives. And so what I tend to do, unfortunately, I've got a few Al-Anon phone numbers on my phone. I send them a text to say, hey, Bonnie, I'm going to send someone over to you. Got an alcoholic husband. can you talk to the wife? And just like us, those Al-Anons are great about saying, yes, absolutely. Have her give me a call or give me her number and I'll call her. Moving along, bottom paragraph of 97. For the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. Get your highlighters out. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. One more time. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it's not. Let me start just a little bit here, David, and I'll turn it
Sure.
over to you. So we've spent a lot of time, it was either last week or the week before, talking about the cannot and the will not. We spent a lot of time on this, and I love how Bill keeps bringing it up. So for the type of alcoholic who is able, so to me, that's someone who can, right, and is willing. That's the trickier thing that we talked about, right? Willing comes from the will. Is my will keeping me from getting sober, right? I may not be able mentally. I may have some other sort of ailment, some other sort of diagnosis that just doesn't make it possible for me to get better yet, right? And a lot of people like that, with the help of psychiatry and therapy, they get solid enough to be able to then get into recovery, all right? So those are the cannots versus the will nots again. And so for those people who are basically able and willing, little charity, right? Sort of giving home and money and services and things like that in the ordinary sense of the word, very little of it is needed or wanted. Again, it's one thing to give a little kickstart. You know, if newcomers coming around and they're down in their luck, you know, they're back living in their parents' basement and they don't have a job. If they ask me for $20, I'm not going to give them $20. I say, you want to come out to eat? I'll happily buy you a meal, right? There's a little bit of difference there. It's just in my experience, not a great idea to lend money in AA to brand new people, you know? But I'll gladly give you a ride, take you for a meal. And that's not charity. I think that's just sort of generosity. I don't know. Maybe I'm splitting hairs. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. First of all, what does this sentence tell me? It says that I can conquer alcohol. How do I conquer alcohol? Well, first of all, I don't. But I can get to a power that can conquer it for me. Right? We have studied this and we talk about it so many times. You guys know when you're here with us every week, we always go back to these core principles. They're so important that we understand them, right? And we have to understand my biggest problem is the lack of a sound relationship with God in my life. I'm not saying God's not in my life because I believe God is in all our lives, but what's my relationship with God? That is my problem. Poor relationship with God, no relationship with God is why my life is unmanageable. It's why I'm spiritually ill. And because I'm spiritually ill, I've got a mental obsession that kicks in that tells me to pick up alcohol and cocaine. And because I have a physical allergy to those things, I break out in craving when I put it in my body. When I get recovered, and David took us back to that for the first edition where it introduced us as recovered past tense people. I'm not recovering at this point. I made all my 9-step amends. I'm living in those daily disciplines at 10, 11, and 12. Bet your bippy I'm recovered by this point. Okay. So we get recovered. And when I get recovered, when I've got a powerful relationship with God, He's solving all my problems. He doesn't give me the power to do it because I would probably abuse the power. God uses His power to solve my problems. And guess what? Alcohol is conquered on my behalf because all of a sudden I don't have a mental obsession. And when I don't pick up, I don't put it in my body and I don't break out in craving. But the other part of this sentence, the men who cry for money and shelter, guys, they're heading in the wrong direction. They are heading in the wrong direction. And this is, David will probably take us to a couple other spots in the book that talks about this, so I'm not going to step on it. I'm just going to say, there's an order of operations when it comes to recovery. I love the spiritual life that I've taken on, and I love all the miracles that I've experienced and continue to see. But to me, there's a very mechanical way to go about this as well that turns into the miracles, right? And when I'm talking about the mechanics, I'm talking about there's a process and there's an order and there's a cadence that we go through this, right? And when I do it the right way in the right order, I get better. The money and the shelter stuff, it's going to sort itself out. It's going to sort itself out. And just because I say the money stuff's going to sort itself out, not everybody's going to be as fortunate as me. I was very fortunate in recovery, many years into recovery. I started a business. That's not everybody's path, right? I know people have so much money and so much wealth. I know other people that are hand to mouth still. That's the one promise God doesn't give us, right? And by the way, my business can go away tomorrow, right? I'm fortunate today that it's nice, but everybody has their own path, right? Some people are corporate raiders and some people have a simple existence. God is going to sort that out for me. All right. But that comes as a result of me getting that relationship with God. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. So again, let's help people get started as appropriate, right? With prayer, with consent from our families, with consent from people that have the spiritual consent with us, our sponsors and our running buddies. Let's be careful, use good judgment. And the last thing it says, this may seem inconsistent. We think it's not. What are they talking about there? They're saying, well, we said don't give people too much. And then a few sentences later, they say, well, let's kill ourselves to help people when appropriate. This is all about good judgment, good discernment, right? And if I've got a healthy relationship with God, if I'm really being of maximum service to him and all his kids, then I think it's going to become evident how to help and to what extent. Right? And if I'm not clear, again, if I don't feel like I'm getting that in my prayer and meditation, that's why I got a sponsor. That's why I got running buddies and guys like David. That's why I got sponsees who've got some strong recovery. Go to them, get their opinion. That's why I got all you guys, right? That's just not making the decision like that on my own unwise.
Yeah, great job. And I won't add a lot to it, but it talks about right at the beginning, the bottom of the paragraph, and then he said for the type of alcoholic. So later on, I think it's on 108 and 109. Yeah, 108 and 109 of two wives. They're going to give us 4 categories of what alcoholic is. So just kind of a preview of what we're going to be getting to in the upcoming weeks. So we can see the different kind of alcoholics in that are untreated alcoholism. So here we are. We're talking about for the type of alcoholic who's able and willing, as David pointed out, great job to get well. What does to get well mean? So what do we want to get well? Well, when we straighten out spiritually, then we straighten out mentally and physically, and it happens in that order. And I'm trying to think, that's on page 64 under the resentments, I think, right? Yeah, 64, third paragraph. It talks about halfway resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all form of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. That is the malady we're talking about. That is the unmanageability. And then it says when the spiritual malady is overcome. So when my life is, I fire myself from my position as CEO of David Inc. and make God my manager of my life, and we manage together in partnership, not me directing God, me taking direction from God. Then my life, I start straightening out spiritually, and then I can straighten out mentally and physically. And then I can deal with resentments because I put them on paper, which is going to be my segue of what we're going to be talking about here. It says back to 98, working with others, top of the page, after getting well. Little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. So absolutely, I'll buy them dinner. I'll buy them a cup of coffee. I'll pick them up and take them to meetings. I'd be happy to do all those things. The man who cried for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. The prospect says that I need my wife back. I need a job. No, you don't. You need inventory. That's what you need. You need to do inventory, bro. I'm sorry to tell you that, but you really do need to do inventory. And if you do inventory, you'll see where your wrongs and your faults are. You'll see what's blocking you from God. You'll see if to take the guidance 6 and 7, and then you'll be willing to make the amends for all the things. And maybe, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I have seen people's lives come together, as David pointed out, we both started businesses in sobriety, and we both been very successful. And and I've seen people just. I think you're supposed to be happy in your job. I think you're supposed to be happy in your career, and I get to I accomplish that every single day. But I start my day out the same way as I always do, on my knees, inviting God in. Always, always, always. I've never missed a day in all my 24 hours. It says the men who cry for money and shelter after conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. So again, I think you need to do is inventory so we can see what's really blocking you. Yet we go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things. And then when such action is warranted, this may seem inconsistent, but we think this is not. So one last thing I want to talk about, because I love the word that David used today, and because we don't use it enough, I think. Let me pull it up here. Hold on. Oh darn, I might have lost it. So it talks about David used the word sound, like sound mind, meaning sanity, like knowing the difference between the true and the false. That the doctor's opinion, we talked about it on Roman numeral 28. Dr. Sofler was talking to us about it. Bottom paragraph: that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, there's going to be injury. They cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. I now know the truth from the false. Today, I know the truth from the false. That I know that if I practice the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and I was talking about David prior to this meeting, even when I'm agitated or doubtful, I pause. Well, I'm not that agitated most of the time. I'm pretty happy go lucky. Sometimes I'm pretty doubtful. I don't know what the thing to do is. So that's when I pause and I go to God for intuitive thought and the right action. And sometimes I do something, and sometimes I don't do nothing at all. And then I always have the 10-step discipline to call David up on the phone, or call my sponsor, Judd, or get a hold of one of you guys and talk about this kind of stuff. This is shoulder to shoulder, right? Always shoulder to shoulder. And this is what I'm trying to demonstrate in the lives of others who come in here. We want them to come back. We want them to carry this message. And the thing is like we talked about, and one thing I forgot to bring up in the on page 97, the third paragraph, offered our way of life. There's a chapter in our big book called A Vision for You. That is a really good chapter to see what my life can look like with a relationship with power. And I will stress that over and over and over again with new people today. Like, have a vision for what you want your life to look like. What do you want to be doing in a year from now? It's like, motivate them to go out and do something. Don't let fear drive you, because a lot of people think, at least I do, I think I'm making a decision. I'm not making a decision. I'm being driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. I'm being driven by those things. I'm not in control. So I need to know the difference. I need to differentiate the truth from the false. But I have sound mind today. And if I follow the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12, I know what God would have me be in all those relationships, with my career, with my wife, with my finances, with God, with you, with strangers, with meetings, with the big book, all those things today. The more I practice it, the more it's second nature. And that feels really, really good, because I don't want to do it any other way, because the result is always successful. Always. There's not, last thing, never been any failure in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, OA, DA, never ever. If you do this honestly and thoroughly, and you do this as if your life depends on it. And for me, it does. My very life depends upon it. Vital, life-saving, life-giving. I need to do this every day. And with that result is I get to affect other people's lives in such a positive way. It brings me to tears sometimes to think that I have, and we talked about it in the bedevilments on page 52, feeling useless, really finding what usefulness feels like today. That's all I got.
Wait, go for one more minute, because I'm looking something up.
Oh, dude.
Keep rolling. Come on.
Can I pick somebody? Can I point at somebody and let them go? Cheryl, you want to go? So anyway, so the bottom line here is if I practice these things here, and if I show a little charity, and if I practice the love and tolerance that I'm supposed to be having here, and it should be coming, like I said, second nature. Like I don't segue my lives into different ways. I'm not punching holes in my walls in my houses anymore. I haven't done that in a long, long time, like decades. I used to do that. Come home from a meeting, get mad. Oh, he's got it. All right, you go, go, bro. Go.
I was leaving this for you because I thought you were going to take us to 64, right?
I did.
Did I miss that?
When the spiritual maladies overcome, we straighten out mentally and
Yeah.
physically.
All right. I'm all sorts of messed up
Go
tonight,
ahead,
guys.
go for it, bro. We can't do that enough.
I
It's a
want
great
to I want to
paragraph.
run it back. Maybe
Go,
I was looking it up when you were talking about it. Yeah.
go.
So there's a few times in the book, right? And this is the first time it's introduced because really at this point in the fourth step, we're talking about our unmanageability, we're talking about our resentment inventory, and we're talking about the number one offender, right? Being resentment. And so important here, this order of operation. So as I talked about back on 98, right? We've got the money and shelter is out of order, right? Before conquering alcohol. We're going to be going in the wrong direction. It's the same thing here. I cannot get better. So David did read it. Forgive me. When the
It's all
spiritual
right.
malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. It all starts with that unmanageability. This is so important, guys. And honestly, this is one of the main reasons why David and I lead this study not as a fellowship meeting, but really just about a study of this book. Because what we have learned in our years of studying together is that our problem is the powerlessness. Our problem is the lack of a relationship with God. And how it expresses itself is a mental obsession, a mental powerlessness. In my case, yeah, over alcohol. In my case, yeah, over cocaine. In my case, any mind altering substance based on my experience. But other things too, guys, when I'm not right with God: sex, money, spending, eating, all right, bullying, fighting. I can be overeating on one side and exercise bulimic on the other. Anything in excess when I am not right with God. And that's why it's beautiful that we do have people of different fellowships here to come and study with us, because that's what the understanding is. The solution's the same. The problem's the same. I don't have an adequate relationship with God, and I need the solution. What's the solution? I've got to get a minimum adequate relationship with God. And what I really need is a powerful and engaging and like so in sync relationship where I am so clear that my purpose is to serve him and all you guys and the other 8 billion people on this planet. And from where I came from, being the selfish, self-centered, self-seeking guy that I am, the fact that it even occurs to me to behave this way, because some days I can still be selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking. It's my core, right? Most days I'm cured from it, but some days I'm not so hot, right? And the fact that it even occurs to me that I spot my behavior when I'm out of line is an absolute flipping miracle.
And let me add something to that. And when we're reading that paragraph, I'm looking at it in a way is I'm trying to get him, the prospect, the candidate, to look at. Okay, at first he's going to be dependent and rely upon me a lot, right? Phone calls, getting to meetings, eyeball connection, go to coffee. I'm his only friend in life, possibly. That's a wonderful thing, and the camaraderie is great. But I'm going to work. As we work through these steps, I am the messenger. I am armed with the facts about myself. I am a man who shouts. On page 18, it talks about that I have a real answer, not a holier than thou answer, right? That's what a sponsor looks like. And it says that my whole deportment shouts to the news prospect, this man is a real answer and has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing, whatever, except the sincere desire to be helpful. I want them to know that, but I'm trying to get them to be relying and dependent upon God. That is it. I have a sponsor who's been sober a couple years longer than me, and he's a big book sponsor. And when I called him that for the first time, he goes, "What's a big book sponsor?" I go, "Dude, someone armed with the facts about themselves and works out of the book." Doesn't mean you're like some guru. I didn't say you were that, but I'm not that, and David's not that. We're just one of that, like, loves to study the big book, and we love to do it together. But the point is like he doesn't make my decisions for me. He doesn't. It's like I had 2 sponsees or 4, or I don't even know how many called me today, and it was a good day. I love when I get done phone calls, and I called a couple of them too because I know they're going through some trials and tribulations in life, and I need to be there for them. I'm not better than them, I'm not worse than them. And when they call me up on the phone and we talk about things, the one thing that I use as the centerpiece all the time is, where's God in all this? Did you pray about this? Did you take this to God first? Because in my defense, if you're brand new, brand new, and I say I'm going to work with you, if you call me after 9 o'clock, I'm not picking up the phone. I put it on silent. I plug my phone in. I can't get you sober or keep you sober anyways. What I suggest to you prior to that is hit your knees and get yourself to a meeting. hit your knees and ask God to keep you sober and get to a meeting. That's what I have to offer to you. And then tomorrow, let's sit down and talk about what's going on until the obsession's removed. And then we talked about how that works out. We needed to straighten out spiritually. David pointed out, I pointed it out, meaning that I have to work all 12 steps. And in Bob's case, it took him a couple of years for his for the obsession to be removed. Not in mine. Mine was at 3 months. I remember exactly the date it happened. Davis was early on also. And Bill's was right away. He had that white flash. I mean, everyone's different, right? But the bottom line here is the thing is like when I straighten out spiritually, I will straighten out mentally and physically here. And I'm just trying to carry that message to the alcoholic and then give him a vision for what his life can look like today. Good, David.
All right, 98. First full paragraph. So at the end of the previous paragraph, it said this may seem inconsistent, the sort of giving or the charity, but we think it's not. And so continuing this thought. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. So highlighters, guys. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. So I think it should be becoming clear what Bill's trying to communicate here, right? He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God.
All right, so I'm going to jump ahead in the book a little bit, but I'm just because we're going to go to the chapter to family afterwards, because this ties really nicely into that though. But is not back to 98 first. It is not the matter of giving that is the question, but when and how to give. So that is the question. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work and service plane on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon assistance rather than upon God. So I just talked about how I'm trying to get him not to depend upon me, because I don't got the power to keep him sober. And he's got to get a relationship with power, which is step 11 in conscious contact with God. He clamors for this or that, claims he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are met. Then there's a period, then there's a one-word sentence, then there's another period, and it's surrounded by or in the middle of nonsense or bullshit. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn the truth. Job, no job, wife or no wife. We simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people and a dependence upon God. So if you guys would like to bounce, the sponsor page 127 in the family afterwards of the first paragraph. This is like just a segue of, I got to remember who I really, really am, that I have done all these things in my life. Page 127, first full paragraph. The head of the house ought to remember that he is mainly to blame for what befell his home. Oh, wait a second. That means I've taken inventory. I know what the fourth column looks like. Then it says he can scarcely square the account in his lifetime, right? Think about it. I can never. If someone did to my family what I did to my family, I would have murdered them, stole from them, lied to them, lost jobs, lost things. The list goes infinitively. And somehow I never lost my family. Some people do. It was the things that I did. It was two lives in one. I'm so blessed. And then he says, but he must, and there's the must, see the danger of over concentration on what? Financial success. It's not my job. My job is to get a relationship with God. He'll take care of my financial success. All the financial recoveries on the way from many of us, and I believe that's true. I rarely I have not seen that not happen. People getting better. I brought up one of David's sponsees before. He's in his apprenticeship right now, and doing something, I mean, really good. David been talking to him for a long time about, like, get a career, dude. do something that you can benefit from. And it's hard, but it gives him purpose and usefulness. And I see it on his face that he's encouraged that life is going to be better, because he's like, dude, I want what you guys have. And it's like, okay, then you got to do what we did. It's like, we lived off of charge cards and on groceries, and we couldn't pay them off for the first 5 years my business started. That's okay. It was just, that's my story, and it's all right. But we figured out how to do it. But I didn't put my concentration on success. What I put it on is God first, sobriety second, my wife third, my children fourth, and then all other things after that. And when I kept it in a nice, tidy order, I didn't have to worry about it. So back to the text, family afterwards, page 127, first paragraph, halfway through. Although financial recovery is on the way for many of us, we found we cannot place money first. Remember God, sobriety. And I don't put sobriety before God, because that means I'm taking credit for my sobriety. I don't get to take credit for that. For us, material well-being always, and that's what I have highlighted there, always. And I only took one psych class in my whole entire life. I didn't finish school, but they said the word never and always should be really watched or frowned upon when you use that in sentences. And I remember that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I dreamed that up. I don't know. But always, in this case, always followed by spiritual progress. It's never. Oh, the two words I just brought up. Always and never. Never preceded. Never. They never come first. Always spiritual first. And then I'll be okay. That has just been my experience. That's all I got, David.
So I like, how these past few pages are going, and I know it's broken up, right? Because we're only doing a page or two, whatever it is, a week. But if you just sort of look, and that's why we're going back to a few of these paragraphs. This is a part of the book that I think flows pretty nicely by Bill, right? There's some other parts of the book he's jumping around a little bit more, but this flows, and I think he's making some really important points here, right? So, just going to underscore a few things David talked about. The whole point here is that it's not about whether we help. It's not about whether we give. It's not about whether we are charitable to some extent. It's just how we go about it. Again, not over enabling people. It's like, what's the right amount of assistance we get to kind of propel someone, in a very human and loving way. And sometimes a loving way is tough love too, guys, right? And I think that's what a lot of what Bill is saying here. So that's going to make the difference between failure and success. Why? Because the minute we put our work on a service plane, catering to their shelter and financial needs and things like that, then they're going to rely upon us instead of God. We're pounding this tonight. This has got to be all about my relationship with God. And when I get with God, that's going to help me figure out how much help I really need from you guys, from social services, from maybe a new or different kind of employer, all those things, right? We're clamoring for this or that because he's relying on us, claiming he cannot master alcohol. So again, first of all, I'm not going to master alcohol any more than I'm going to conquer alcohol, but God's going to master it for me. Because heretofore, to this point, up to now, alcohol was my master. Cocaine was my master. So it's going to be mastered for sure. But this concept that it's not going to happen until I've got money in my pocket, my needs are cared for, and as David talked about, my wife has let me back in the house, my kids are talking to me again, and it's just not how it works. I've met many people in recovery who were losing their marriages, came in, got recovered, had a great recovery, are still recovered today, and their marriage ended. It's sad, but it's amazing how the marriage ended, the divorce happened with grace. I've not experienced too many times that people came in, got really recovered, and had a nasty divorce, right? Because if I'm really recovered, God is going to lead me through that process. Our buddy Eddie, we bring up from time to time, and he's a couple years he's been sober now, and he's many cancer surgeries, and he's so happy and he's so spiritual, and he really wanted to save his marriage, and it didn't happen. And he's he's all about God is going to dictate how this is going to go with my marriage and with my cancer. And the marriage ended, and the cancer went away. So I guess he's maybe, I don't know, 1 for 2, which is pretty good for a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. So job or no job, wife or no wife, husband or no husband. Okay? We simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. And guys, there were many times in the book prior to this point, human reliance fails us. David had taken us back to Roman numeral 28, 29, and right in there, Dr. Jung's talking about the whole concept of human reliance, right? It's failing us. That's why we've got to form this dependence upon God. And this is the whole impetus behind our fear inventory and the fact that we're so full of fear. It's all about the failure of human reliance. What kind of human reliance failed us? Self-reliance. I, as a self, am a human. That failed me too. We got here. Okay, 13 minutes. Perfect. Next paragraph, paragraph 2 on 98, little one again. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition, highlighters, there's a condition, but there's only one. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. You know, I love this statement. I will tell you why I love this statement. Because we so many times, we have all these little slogans and expressions in recovery of the 12 steps. And we say, the 12 steps are just broken down to, find God, clean house, and help others, right? There's some truth in that, obviously. And I had studied this book for years. And then me and David and our friend Nance had started, when we first started doing our big book study, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, started on Zoom, and then COVID got over, thank God. And then we went to hybrid. So it was David and Nance and my, I don't know, second or third time through the book. And we read that line and I was like, oh my God, I never read that before. Trust in God and clean house. But I've read this a million times, right? I've read this. I'd studied it with David and Nance many times. But for whatever reason, that line just hit me today. And I was like, oh, that's where that little slogan came from. It wasn't just somebody who was clever and thought about it in the meeting. No. Right? The trust in God, the clean house is right there, and then helping others is pretty self-evident. I love this, but I also love the visceral statement that Bill's got in the first sentence. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. So irrespective of the human reliance that failed me, burn it into the consciousness. Think about the sort of image Bill's using here. He's talking like a brand, like a cattle brand. Burn it, but not into my body. Burn it into my mind. Burn it into my third eye, right? Burn it in there. That no matter what, no matter anyone, no matter the circumstances, if I'm able and I'm willing, I am going to get better. I can get well. Get well doesn't mean stop drinking or drugging or cutting or spending or sexing or whatever. Yeah, that's the baseline. That's just the ain't it grand the wind stop blowing. Getting well, I'm talking about, Bill's talking about here, getting recovered. 180-degree shift in my thinking, in my thinker, my feeler, and my reactor, my head, my heart, and my gut, my thoughts, my feelings, and my attitudes.
Yeah, so a non-alcoholic told me this long before I even read this textbook, and they told me this paragraph. They did. I was in a psych ward. It was a psych patient, not a doctor, psychiatrist, not a nurse, not a therapist, nothing like that. Talked about it. It says that every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. So when I was in my third day of detox in a psych ward, I finally was forced to talk. I wasn't in any condition to talk prior to that. And then the third day I said, okay, I'll talk. And I said, I hate my wife for making the phone call. She had called 911 on me and got me arrested. I got arrested. She got me arrested. I got arrested because of my actions. And I'm sitting in this treatment center, in this psych ward with psych patients, no alcoholics and addicts. And one of the patients who was on Thorazine, because it took her 15 minutes to tell me this, so I had to sit there and wait. But she said, David, and I'm going to speed it up because I don't know how to go slow. She said, David, if it's your wife's fault for why you drink and drug, you're going to drink and drug until you die. And that was the moment of clarity that we talk about in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that where God froze the liar in me long enough to see the truth and then these revelations started to come true as I started working the steps, like realizing that my happiness is not dependent upon what you do or don't do for me. My happiness is dependent directly as a result of the work that I do in Alcoholics Anonymous as I live in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12. I am happy, joyous, and free. What God intended me to be all the time. And it's the direct result of living in those disciplines, doing those inventories, the mother of all inventory in 4, taking these things, these defects and shortcomings that were blocking me because of my circumstances and because of my ego that got in the way of those things. When those things are deflated and put right size, then I can go out and make my amends, which I should do quickly. Go make all my amends, and then I can live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. And then it says the only condition, and you can call it a condition, or you can call it a must. I don't care what you call it. Let's call it a condition because that's what Bill wrote, is that he trusts in God. Now, how will I do that? Well, step 1 told me that I'm powerless. I have no power, no choice, no control. And step 2 says I came to believe that there's a power greater than myself. So if I really know, concede to my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic, that I'm powerless, I shouldn't have problem with power. And now I call it God just because it's one syllable word. It's easy to say, God of my own understanding. We don't have a God in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can call it whatever you want to call it. We don't care. And then it says, trust God, clean house. Oh, there maybe should be a 3-letter sentence after that. Work with others. Don't you think? Don't you think that we should have to work with others too? It's just not about God, trusting God and cleaning house. It's about what I brought up earlier on. This gift given to us cannot keep for myself. I have to give the whole load away, just like they talk about in the book. The whole thing has to be given away. And when I do that, I get refreshed all the time. So it's all about trusting God, cleaning house, helping others, right? We know that. We know that term. We hear it here at meetings. Work with others. Help others is one thing. And that's okay. So I try to do all day long. Whenever I'm a salesperson, but I don't call myself a salesperson in my company that I own, but I call it a service position. I service my customers. But what I help them. But I'm talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous that we work with others. Taking it, I'm armed with the facts about myself. I'm armed about the facts about this big book to the best knowledge that I have, to carry this message, not my message, to the alcoholic still suffers, so that they can have the same life that God intended them to have all along. That's all, David.
Thanks, David. All right, let's squeeze in one more paragraph here. Bottom of 98. Now the domestic problem. There may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. When your prospect has made such reparation as he can to his family and has thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. Highlight that. Woo. He should proceed to put those principles into action at home. That is, if he's lucky enough to have a home. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. Highlight this next statement. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. It is no surprise that as each one paragraph leads into the next, we're talking about these concepts, right? Because it just so naturally lends itself. David was making a whole point about this a few minutes ago. Demonstration. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected. If persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. And that's a promise. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. All right, so now, as we talk about this paragraph, let's make sure we're reading exactly what Bill put here. This is not subject to interpretation. There's no maybes in here about, well, sometimes we can point out some faults and things like that, right? Go ahead, David.
Well, because I'm blessed to have so many friends in Alcoholics Anonymous, and because of the Zoom era that we live in now, I get to study with, and you should read the last chat that Howard posted on there too about working with cleaning, trust God, clean house, and work with others. So go ahead and read that if you would, and then I'll go on here. But we talk about now the domestic problem, just like what Bill says, most alcoholics owe money. How do they know? Well, most alcoholics have domestic problems too, right? Just kind of go hand in hand. There may be a divorce, a separation, or just strained relations. When your prospect has made such reparations, so in other words, made the amends, change as he can to his family, and thoroughly explain to them the new principles by which he's living. 12 principles, and we're talking about also the 12 principles, the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous too. But the one I want to really talk about is 12. As we talk about how to carry this. The gift is that we carry this. That we've had a. Hold on, let me go to the page so I don't screw it up here. The 12th step says on page 60 of our books talks about. Says that having had a spiritual awakening is the result of the step. So that's what we've been given. That's the miracle of the whole thing. It says then we try to carry this message to the alcoholics. That's the charge for having this miracle take place in my life. And then to practice these principles in all my affairs. That's the challenge. Well, back to my point is I got to study with Kathy and Howard I've been doing that for well over a year now. And he's picked out the principles of success. And we will try to get to that as we get into the next 3 chapters after this one, to the wives and the family afterwards, and the employers. These directions, if I read this thing a little bit differently than these directions to my wife or to the employer, to the family, these are my directions. If I just flip them around, right? And one of them is to never argue, or something. It's on page 111, I believe it is. And the thing is like, I can practice that principle if I read these things, principles of success. I want these principles will be successful in my life. And because I want to be a demonstration in my life. I've got coming up on 25 years of sobriety. I got to watch my children all grow up, have relationships, have families, successful ones. Like we just got back from a college trip where my grandson was at. We all in one house together for a whole weekend. We had a blast. Daughters and son-in-laws and grandchildren and wife, and it was wonderful. It's like, and my wife and I got to be demonstrations on how to have a loving and caring relationship. And my wife didn't need these 12 steps in her life to do that. These are against my nature, and I get to practice this in my life today, allow that to happen. And I'm going to shut up after this because we're probably just going to need go on. But the bottom of the page there, argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. Bill is giving us directions on how to disagree, not how to argue. There's a big difference there. And David and I will talk about that a little bit next week, and some of the methods that we use, and some of the things that I've heard and I practiced, and my wife has practiced it too in our relationship. And we avoided argument and we had disagreements. That's a big, big change for us.
So very quickly before we wrap up here, guys, David said it, and that's why I was sort of giggling as I read this. This is direction for us. These are not just general sort of guidelines that we can decide to twist and turn into anti-spiritual practices, right? So just out at the top here, there may be divorce, separation, or strained relations. I said God's going to dictate how things are going to go with our relationships. But that one that I said to highlight, proceed to put these principles into action at home. Don't consider doing this. Don't do it sometimes. Do it all the time, right? And it's easy to find fault in other people. That's what Bill's pointing out here. I'm not to concern myself with that as a recovering alcoholic, and even as a now recovered alcoholic, right? I need to concentrate on my own spiritual demonstration, which is serving God and all you people, and chiefly the people that I live with, right? Sometimes they get the short end of the stick. There is no argument. There's no arguing. There's no fault finding, right? Yes, it's hard to do. If I want results, right, that I have to put that aside. And that's a promise. It's sort of a little inadvertent promise, but it's a promise nonetheless. If I don't get into arguing and fault finding, then I'm going to get some results. And more promise, right? If I do this, the effect on my families would be great. It's a wonderful promise. The most incompatible people will discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. That's yet another promise. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. That's yet another promise. And then these can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. Promise. That whole part of that paragraph. Promise, 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 promise. How do the promises come true? By me working on me and being a demonstration. That's it. Thanks for being here, guys.
And thank you guys very much. Appreciate you guys for being here.